State and local officials. A statement by New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg in the past hour saying the power is slowly coming back from west to north, but that it will be hours and not minutes we're talking about until restoration. That is a remarkable scene unfolding right now in New York. That is the Weehawken Ferry, the ferry across the Hudson River from the Manhattan West Side over to New Jersey, and those are all commuters flooding into the ferry entrance. They will all be served. It may not be right away, and it may take hours and not minutes. New York City officials are trying to prevent any kind of panic in the streets. And so far, they are doing a good job of it from all the reports we are getting in. The people in New York understand this situation, understand what's going on. I'm not sure we can say that for all of the thousands of people who stopped on subway trains in the middle of darkened tunnels in this city. But this was not the result of a terrorist act from all indications and from federal sources, state and local. The federal power management folks are going on the record saying this was a power grid failure. We are fortunate in that a lot of this happened during afternoon daylight here in New York as the sun moves from east to west with the time zones across the country. People in Cleveland, Ohio still have a good deal of daylight as well as they try to get their city in order. The fountains have stopped. Many people have stopped and decided to call it an afternoon and wait it out. And a note about our coverage. We will obviously be on the air live from now until into the evening hours with as much of this story as we can cover with our correspondents, neighboring cities, NBC News bureaus, and own stations in our network as we welcome viewers on MSNBC on cable and the NBC television network. For now, we will hand over to my colleague in MSNBC headquarters, Lester Holt, to carry us a bit later on all of these NBC stations. We'll be coming on the air later, of course, with a live edition tonight of NBC Nightly News from here in New York, where we are operating on generator power. Lester?
Well, Brian, fortunately, we have air conditioning here. We are among the lucky here in the Northeast as the power outage begins to ease, according to the mayor of the city of New York. Still a little bit unclear as to where this all started. The mayor says either in northern New York State or southern Canada, part of that interconnecting power grid. He says the power is beginning to come on from the north and from the west, and there are reports from CBC in Canada that limited power pockets are starting up, and power is on the community of Niagara, Ontario, and some communities along Lake Huron in Ontario. But as Brian has been reporting, this extends as far west into Michigan and Ohio. And joining us now on the telephone from our NBC affiliate WDIV is Paula Tutman. Paula, can you describe the situation as it is right now in Detroit?
Yeah, hi, Lester. Can you hear me okay? I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
We've got you fine. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, I'm sitting out front of Beaumont Hospital, one of our level 1 trauma centers. We actually have 3 in the area. They're telling me that their clocks actually stopped working at about 4:05 this afternoon. However, they do have emergency generators right now. Their critical care areas, their patient care areas are open. Emergency room obviously open. No surgeries are interrupted right now, but anybody who thinks they may have an emergency, they're asked to really assess whether or not they should come to the hospital, because obviously, I'm not going to say that it's chaotic there, but they're definitely challenged. Our metro airport is closed for flights right now. Flights have been stopped. Planes in the air have been landed, but right now there are no new flights or at least scheduled departures as they try to figure out what to do at the airport. This is rush hour traffic, Lester, so obviously if the traffic lights aren't working, well, you can simply imagine what traffic is like. It took about, I'm going to say 40 minutes or so for police officers to get about 8 miles north of the city of Detroit. I'm in a suburb about 8 miles north of Detroit, and so they actually had civilians out in the street who were directing traffic. I don't want to say there's a sense of panic. There was certainly some concern. We're in the middle of a classic car festival, so people have been lining the streets, and they were just kind of watching the cars go by, and all of a sudden there was this huge traffic jam. I don't think people even knew what was going on until I started doing live shots for, I guess, the 1 or 2 people who have battery-operated televisions or home generators. At any rate, they started using their cell phones. We did have some interrupted cell phone service for a while, but as word started trickling out, there was great concern. But I don't want to say there was panic. I think it's probably a different scenario in New York just based on what happened at 9/11. I think people were very, very concerned, but not panicked. And now things have just kind of settled down again.
All right, Paula Tubman at WDIV in Detroit. Paula, thanks for checking in and giving us a sense of what's happening in Detroit, one of the many major cities being affected by this blackout, which, according to the reports we're getting now, is beginning to ease, but it is a process that will take a great amount of time. In New York right now, commuters trying to make their way out of Manhattan. It is a scene not unlike what we saw on September 11th. The difference in this case, when these folks you see at those along the pier, when they get to the other side of the river in New Jersey, they'll be in very much the same situation as a good portion of New Jersey, as it surrounds the New York City metropolitan area, is also without power. There you see one of the many ferry boats that normally ply these waters, and a lot of folks now who are trying to get across the river right now as the subway that normally runs is stopped, and the tunnels, according to the pictures we've been seeing, either stopped or moving extremely slowly right now. NBC correspondent Rosalind Jordan is in our Washington bureau and has been looking a bit into the power grid that seems to have taken the big hit today. Rosalind, what have you learned?
Well, Lester, this is certainly a situation where we find out just how much we take electricity, the lights that are shining in this newsroom right now, for granted. There are more than 3,170 independent power companies in the country. Some of them are investor supplied, some of them are publicly owned, but we take this system for granted. Now, I want to show our viewers some graphics that I downloaded from the Department of Energy website, and I'm sorry that they're not more high tech, but where I've got the areas outlined. Basically, we have 3 areas that are affected or that manage electricity. You have something called the Eastern Interconnected System, you have the Western Interconnected System, and you have the Texas Interconnected System, which in very rare instances shares electricity with the other 2. The utilities in this part of the country share electricity with each other. They establish contracts. They sell electricity to each other. In the East, the same situation. Now, it's not just these 3 regions that we're talking about in the continental United States. We have 10 regions, 10 regions that are broken down. And again, if you can see the red outline, these are the 10 regions that are really supposed to manage the flow of electricity from one area that doesn't really need a lot of it to another that might have a greater demand. In this case, New York State, the throes of late summer, it's been very hot. A lot of people turning on their air conditioning, trying to stay cool, especially if they're senior citizens or small children or hospitals that need to keep critical equipment safe. Now, here's something that is really worth pointing out. In this graphic, and again, this is from the Department of Energy, where you have most of the power outages are not so much in New England, although we are getting reports of scattered outages. Where you see this problem happening in New York State, a few problems in Pennsylvania, it's going into the Great Lakes region. These areas also have a lot of electricity sharing with Ontario and some other central Canadian provinces. This may be a reason why you hear people talking about this spillover effect, more communities that aren't connected to where the problem originated actually having this problem. Lester?
All right, Rosalind Jordan, thanks very much in Washington. And we should note Washington among those cities not affected by this power outage. JP Morgan Chase, we should note, says it's New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. ATMs are affected, among the many things we take for granted affected by this. NBC Justice correspondent Pete Williams is covering the federal response to all this for us from Washington. Pete, what do you have?
Okay, Lester, several things to report. First of all, the Department of Homeland Security is now saying publicly what many law enforcement officials have been saying privately. There is no indication that terrorism had anything to do with this outage. It appears to be some sort of technical failure, not anything man-caused. The Federal Aviation Administration has grounded planes waiting for takeoff at the 3 main New York airports at LaGuardia, JFK, and Newark. They're also adding Cleveland, Ohio to that list, and 2 airports in Canada, Ottawa and Toronto. The same applies to airplanes at Northwest Airlines in Detroit. So planes in the air headed for those airports had the option of landing, but planes on the ground at other airports hoping to go there cannot take off. Homeland Security officials say they have no idea when the power will be back on. They say there have been no requests for help from the federal government in any of the cities they've been talking to. They've been in touch with mayors and state governors. No request for help, but they are cataloging any potential problems they may need to address. The Ambassador Bridge, a main transit point between the United States and Canada at Detroit is open, they say, with backup power, even though the main power systems are out in that area. Now, one of the questions that Homeland has to work out is, what do they do about airline screening at airports that have no power? Now, where there is no power, of course, the planes aren't taking off, so it's not an immediate problem. But they're asking themselves, for example, do they hand wand passengers who don't have any carry-on and allow them to go on ahead into the passenger departure areas and wait for when their planes might take off, or do they just empty those areas out of passengers and wait till everybody can go back through when they get the power on? Obviously, they can hand wand passengers